Welcome back to another episode of the Practical Shaman Podcast. And today I have a very special guest, Dr. Davina Kotulski, who is a licensed psychologist, life coach, spiritual counselor, best-selling and award-winning author and speaker, and nationally known LGBT rights leader. She received her PhD in psychology in 1996 and has a private therapy practice in Los Angeles and an international life coaching practice. She is passionate about helping people overcome obstacles to make their dreams come true. And she's the author of Why Should We Give a Damn About Gay Marriage, Love Warriors, The Rise of Marriage Equality Movement and Why It Will Prevail, Behind Barbed Eyes, and How to Come Out of the Closet into Your Power. Her next book, It's Never Too Late to Be Yourself, How to Follow Your Inner Compass and Live a Life You Love, is in publication. Welcome. And what I might just say is that we met through an LGBTQ conference, which Dr. Davina was a speaker at last year. Oh, and she'll be rejoining us this year in January. I haven't sent out the letters, but I'll let you know that you're coming.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that. It was so much fun last year.
It's an awesome conference. And, you know, and one of the things that leads us right into this conversation, you like to talk about the creative muse, and often creatives find themselves when they think they're going in one direction, and like this LGBTQ conference, that it was a work assignment. And, you know, what had happened for me was it opened up this thing that I didn't really even know that I was in the closet for 35 years. I mean, I had gay friends, I had lovers, I had all of those things, but that I was not able to really open up and be myself. So talk about that for yourself, like where the creative muse has led you down to roads that you didn't even know you were heading.
My whole life. Yeah, no, I love that because I think that there's so many ways that these things are all connected. One is, you know, when you talk about coming out, there's a connection of when you're coming out as LGBT or coming out as an artist, it's all about being fully self-expressed and being open to life and being in the flow. And I think for many people, when they even realize that they're LGBT, that's kind of can be surprising too, because we're, you know, I'm going to talk more about this in another forum, but we're kind of all raised in this culture of compulsory heterosexuality where there's an expectation of who we're going to be. And then we realize, oh, something's different about us. So I think even coming out was an area of my life where I didn't expect that. But I think for many things, I worked for many years, and this is connected to the Seduce Your Muse. I worked for many years as a psychologist in a women's prison. And one year I went on vacation to Venice, Italy. And while I was there, I got this sense that I was going to come back and I was going to write a book. I just felt like something was connecting with me, and it was saying, you'll be back and you're going to write about, you know, this person and this story that I didn't even know who this person was yet, but I just kept listening. And a few years later, I saved up money and I went back to Venice and I wrote for 3 weeks there, and the story started to evolve, and it just kept leading me down these different roads, kind of like, you know, the breadcrumbs, you follow the breadcrumbs. And then a few years after that, I was granted a scholarship to go to Italy and write. And while I was, after I came back from this incredible experience, I was given a free scholarship. I came back to the prison and I realized I can't do this work anymore. It's actually killing my soul. And I remember it was 4th of July and I had just flown back into town and the fireworks were happening around me and I was jet lagged and I just started crying and I thought, I had done 13 years in the prison. I had 12 more years to go to retirement. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. It's deadening because everyone was like doing prison sentences there. And I got a life coach and I left to follow my muse. And my muse took me in new directions. And then I was going to go back and write some more. And I realized I was woken up one night and I realized I need to take people with me. And what had happened while I was there was the the angels kind of contacted me, and that's when I started working with the angels. And I don't know if I know you work with the wind. I don't know if you work with the angels at all, but I had never considered myself as somebody who worked with angels. I wasn't raised Christian or anything like that. But when I was in Italy, the angels literally kind of came to me, especially Raphael, who's known for healing, and I'm a psychologist. I do healing work. And Gabriel, who's I didn't know at the time, was the angel of writing. And so then I started to call upon the muses and the angels to help me with my writing. Anyway, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but that was something that started to happen. I'll come back to that. But yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, and about the question about angels. So
yeah,
a few weeks ago, I did a past life regression with this young man who was wide awake. And I don't do those very often. And at the end, we were doing a changing of the guards, like it was time for some new energy in my spiritual field. And so I'm like wandering through this field looking for angels. And I was like, damn, I never get to see the angels. And so all of a sudden I look down and there's this lion. And I'm there, a lion, and I'm shamanic. So it makes sense that I'd get a power animal. But right. The lion looks up at me and says, well, I can fly. And so this weekend I was, I've been taking this Harvard course in religion. And one of the things was we were looking at, the book of the Bibles. And there was my lion with the wings. Yeah. So I was like, okay. So, it's kind of like, okay, I guess I need to do some more research into that book. And, so we get our muses in way different ways, but how do you even recognize the difference between a muse and a non-muse?
Great question. Well, so first of all, I want to say the winged lion is actually the patron saint of Venice, Italy, at St. Mark's. And so that's just kind of an interesting connection there, that the winged lion. So the muses basically come from Greek and Roman mythology, and they are the 9 daughters of Zeus. And basically they are the helpers in the arts and the sciences. So poets would call on muses, scientists who are working on different things would call on muses. And what I started to realize was that, and as a writer, and you know this too, like, for example, with my first book, Why You Should Give a Damn About Gay Marriage, it literally flowed through me. It was time for that book to be birthed, and I was open and available. And I would pray ahead of time, like, okay, I need to write this chapter, Spirit. Please bring the ideas to me, bring the people to me so that this chapter can be birthed. And so there's, you can write from your head where you're trying to force things onto the page. I kind of call it writing constipation. Or you can call upon the muses and the divine flow and ask for assistance. And it's amazing. It is a miracle because you're not trying to do it all yourself. You're being open. And so the muses are there to help us and to support us. But I believe they need to be seduced. And so when I was, years ago, when I was working with a poet who was trying to complete her dissertation, and she wrote a lot of romantic poetry, whatever, but the dissertation was so heady that she just kept getting caught up. And I said, okay, well, let's seduce your muse. So why don't you bring flowers to your writing table, make yourself a good cup of coffee or tea, put on some music that's inspiring, and light a candle. Invite your muse in, make him or her feel welcome, right? Mm. And it's connecting to that juicy process. And so many people just try to sit down and write at a computer in a library or something, and there's no heart in it. There's no soul in it, right? So as artists, we need to honor the muses, invite the angels in, and even the goddesses like Saraswati, who is the goddess of creativity and teaching and music. And I love that you mentioned your power animals, because I've also called in my power animals, like, please help with this. And so it might sound super woo-woo to, people who might be doing academic writing or whatever, but it makes a difference, right? And you've been in the flow before. What are your rituals, Renee, for connecting?
Well, right even before that I got on the call with you, like I just got a rejection from something, and then so, and lately, when you're in and out of the flow, because the flow you can come up to a wall. So I went outside, and this week's wind of spirit is Hulda, the Teutonic, who likes people who work hard and rewards you, and she takes the maidens to the deep well, and all of those attributes of those same kind of mythology of the muses, you can call upon them. So I just actually went out and called in the winds of all the directions to come and help me know what path is mine, and what paths aren't mine, because I don't, probably like you, it sounds like it. We're both very multi-talented. I cook, I paint. That's one of my paintings in the back. I write, I'm a shaman, and I'm a marketer. I'm all of these things, but I've been taking this advertising course this week on social media. And it's like, find that 4% of the 20% of what you are, and really get in and focus. So for me, I can do all of it. My muse is I need to come in and hone me into what's the right next project right now. What is the very next step that I take? And I think for cultural creatives like you are, who like this cooperative creative process, we can, in a weekend, we could paint the living room, cook a meal for our friends, and, and spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours working on our own project. So, there's just so much with that, but I never really seduced my muse in that way. Like, I do love Saraswati, and one day when I just sat and listened to Krishna Das chanting that over and over again while I wrote. So I guess I never even knew that Saraswati was a creative muse. So
yeah, and that's beautiful that you were chanting, like that. Rituals like chanting and meditation before you sit down to create are so important, because you're getting rid of the ego and you're tapping into the soul, into your higher self. So definitely meditating, praying, lighting a candle. These are all great ways for people to clear the space and enter that sacred realm when they're going to write or create or paint. And I love how multi-talented you are. It's so fantastic. And I really like what you're saying. It's true. It's like, you have a lot of talents, and there might be things that people invite you to do and to participate in, but knowing what Julia Cameron calls your vein of gold. And I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's so great. Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way. Before that, she wrote a book called The Vein of Gold.
I have it, yes.
Yeah, it's so good. It's about finding that sweet spot. Like you said, like, what is yours to do? Because that's where that's where you strike the gold. That's where, your strongest voice comes out. And actually, I was just coaching a client the other day about that, because she's being invited to do all these guest writing things. And it's like, okay, but what do you really want? What are you passionate about? Because sure, you could write an article about this, but is that juicy for you?
Right. Does that give you, someone said, does that give you enough so that you get out of bed and say, yes,
exactly,
every single day? And, I think as creatives, we also go through the period of non-creation. So talk about your periods of non-creation, those periods where, you couldn't get out of your own way to write a page if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's a great point. So especially when you go through things like you hit a wall, like rejection, like if you're writing, you're gonna hit walls where your creativity stops. You're gonna hit bumps in the road where maybe a project doesn't get accepted or it doesn't turn out the way that you want to. And so it's really good to keep replenishing yourself, right? So if you can't write, go and do other things. Go be creative, have fun. Having fun is so important. People don't realize that it gets so serious. It is very important to work hard. I absolutely agree. And, when you keep showing up to the page, that's great. But also you need to play, and you need to do, like you said, you need to cook, you need to paint. Those are things that fill your well. When I take people to Italy, one of the reasons that I take people to Italy to write is because it's this beautiful Renaissance city. There's so much art and creativity, and we go to the market and we eat, and we go out and do some other fun art things, and we wear our masks and we just play, because playing and, you know, kind of connecting with our inner child and just being playful, that allows you to get back and to use your right brain, because we're such a left-brained, you know, world in so many ways. I mean, you know, I know that when you're in the shamanic world, that's definitely not left brain, and that's why it's so incredible, because you're open to the right brain. But I think people in the United States have gotten very left-brained, and so we're only, you know, working with one hemisphere and not the totality of the heart, the mind, the right and the left. So playing is a really good thing to do. Reading can help kind of get your creative juices flowing.
Taking a wind walk.
Yeah, I love that. Taking a wind walk. Yeah, do you want to say more about that?
There, you know, it's a mindfulness-based practice that came to me when I was writing the book. Like one of those muses that all of a sudden I walked outside one day and I thought, okay, well, what's my next question? And the wind came and brushed me on my face. And I'm there like, oh, okay, you got my attention.
Yeah.
And then I walked. And then, you know, so I learned this practice of when I would walk with the wind, I would be told like unbelievable things that I could hardly even fathom, because I never been much one who was a medium or a channel. And I always even kind of made fun of those people who, you know, tapped into that stuff. And next thing I know, the wind is teaching me how to write a book and, you know, what it wants to share and all of this stuff. And like, for somebody like me who goes back and forth between the brains consistently, that was like mind bending, you know. So Winds of Spirit, actually, I don't call it channeled, but it was certainly wind inspired. How's that?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think like you said, just getting out. We talked about meditation. When I was writing Why You Should Give a Damn About Gay Marriage, like I said, I would pray. For example, I had to write a chapter on LGBT veterans and the rights that LGBT people who were serving our country didn't get and didn't have access to. And I really needed some personal knowledge about it. I could look up and, you know, some things, but I would pray about it, and then people would show up. And I would go and have conversations with them, and I would learn so much. And I was like, thank you, Creator. Like, you brought these people to me. I remember going for a hike with some people who were in a binational relationship where one person was from another country. And it was like, you know, tell me, what is it like to be here and not be able to marry the person that you love? And if they were of the opposite gender, you would just marry them and they would get citizenship. But because we don't have that right, we're not allowed to marry, how does that impact you guys as a couple? And I just learned so much on that hike. I love, you know, I've was introduced to shamanic journeys and soul retrieval back in 1994, 95, and doing shamanic journeying or going into nature. There's an exercise Michael Harner taught years ago, which was go find a rock and sit with a rock and ask it questions, and it reveals stuff to you. And so I think those things are priceless. You know, our environment, just both being open and available, those answers will come. So I love that. And I love that the wind spoke with you. And again, I think some people might think that's super woo-woo, but I disagree. I mean, it's beautiful. The universe is speaking to us if we are willing to listen.
And anyone who knows me knows that I'm not really super woo-woo at all. Very practical, down to earth. Funny you should be talking about rocks. Yesterday, I had a coaching client who called me. She's, I don't know, 7 or 8 months pregnant. And, you know, she's like doing the dance, like, oh, my baby going to be all right. Well, I'm thinking like, couldn't you like spend your time thinking about, you know, the books you're going to read or so, but you know, you can't tell somebody. So I gave her this exercise about writing down her fears and putting it in a wind sack.
Oh, that's great.
Which she has, putting it in a wind sack, tying it up and tossing it off to the wind. And then when that one didn't, you know, that one was one thing. I gave her that a month ago. She wasn't doing it. I said, hey, you're at the beach. go find yourself a friend, get yourself a rock. And for the next month, every time you have a thought like that, demand that it goes into the rock. She's there like, oh, that's great. So, it's like rock talk. Here you go.
Yeah, no, and that's wonderful. That's a great strategy for letting go. I also, with people who are writing, I encourage them to write down, why are they the person to write this book? Like, what are their unique qualities? Why is their voice needed? Because again, we're all called forth to contribute our gifts and talents. And kind of connecting to what you just said about, her reading the books to her kid, I'll invite people to visualize and imagine. Imagine you're talking to one of the people that have had, that's read your book, and they're sharing with you how, your book has made a difference. And I'm sure now you've had lots of people share that with you, Renee, whereas a year ago when we first met, your book hadn't come out yet. And I'm sure now you're like hearing just how profound this book is. And those kinds of things are really helpful for people to just visualize yourself connecting with your audience.
And that's really funny. We're like really super connected, but it's funny you should say that, because the other day, I'll be teaching at Omega in August. And the other day I was like, well, who's going to be in that class?
Yeah.
And it's like, and, of course I take a wind walk, and the wind said, well, why don't you sit down and actually get out your rattle or get out the drumming CD and journey and find those souls and those people who need to be there and put them all in a circle so that they're called. And I thought, like, I'm so practical sometimes that a lot of my friends are very shamanic. They're very like, they get their flowers out to seduce that muse. And I just like go about until the wind slaps me and says, okay, change direction. Your sail is flapping in the wind, Renee. And so, I'm not a quick learner.
Well, that's good though, because at least you are reminded again and again how valuable that is. So even if it's not your go-to, obviously you're reminding us all that when we do those things, it makes such a difference, right? So calling in your participants, calling in those souls that you're going to connect with, what I call, people that you're having a divine appointment with.
Right.
And that's amazing. Like the first group of people that showed up to the Seduce Your Muse I did in Italy in 2011 were incredible. And they came from, different corners of the world. And it was such a powerful group that all needed to be together in that one moment. And just continue to show up after that, for the ones that I had later. It's just wild. So yeah, the people that are going to get to be with you and to be at Omega, which is such a gorgeous place. I got to do a class there with Brian Weiss many years ago. It's such a gorgeous healing, place to be. It's going to be incredible. I'm so excited for you.
I am excited too. I want to go back to something you said, because, we're coming shorter on time here.
Yeah.
It's a time. There's no time. There's, it's a shamanic thing here. But you were talking about why you're the right person to write this book.
Yeah.
And something that I know that it needs to be enough fuel to get you through. I don't know. People always say, how did you become a Hay House author? Just throw my book in here, Winds of Spirit.
Yeah. Great book.
I got rejected by 14 other publishing houses. You need, I don't know how I'm thinking.
You got
14, whatever, 12. And so the truth of the matter is that you need a dream that's big enough to jump over walls that you hit.
Yes.
And I know the same thing with you is like you've written several books and, I know you've worked hard to get them published. And one of the things as a creative, you have to remember that who publishes you, the process of writing, the book creates its own soul when you cooperate with it. And it has its own life that has nothing to do with you as an author. And so I think you've learned that. So talk about that relationship to once you've given birth. And this why gay marriage should matter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you wrote that years and years ago, but it's probably more relevant now than ever. I mean, in a certain way, because here we are faced again with, will our rights be
backwards?
We're going it feels like we're going backwards, or maybe it's pushing us to go forward. We can't tell because it's a wall.
Yeah.
So
Why You Should Give a Damn About Gay Marriage, which came out in 2004, and then the follow-up, Love Warriors, Why Marriage Equality Will Prevail. Now I can't remember the subtitle of that one. They're both great books. The reason I did the second one is because so many things had changed between the first one and the second one, so I wanted to update people. But both of the books talk about all of the rights that we've been denied, how it's impacted people, the loving couples and how they were affected by not having the same rights, looking at comparisons between previously oppressed groups and the LGBT community, and how marriage throughout time has been used as a way to dehumanize people. So, and other civil rights, like Native Americans weren't even considered citizens in the United States until 1935. Asian Americans, men were allowed to come here to work, but they weren't allowed to bring their wives. So they were denied the right to marry. And if they married a white woman, the white women lost their citizenship and lost all of their rights in the United States. Marriages between people of different races were illegal in this country in many states until 1967. So there are ways in which marriage discrimination has been a way to oppress minority groups and stigmatize people and dehumanize people and keep them from forming families, and then blame them for being unstable. Just like, Black Americans who came here against their will from Africa were not allowed to form family bonds. They were not allowed to marry. Their children were stripped from them. So both books look at the oppression of marriage throughout the United States and how that's gone on, as well as bringing talking points about the importance of separation of church and state and those kinds of things. I was very passionate about writing those books because I am against discrimination. I'm somebody that believes that we are all created equal. And even if our circumstances have been different, we are all entitled to, have our liberties and to have the right to love and to create families and to work. And anyhow, I don't believe people, like Dr. King said, should be judged on the color of their skin or their sexual orientation. I'm adding that part. He didn't say that.
He would have, though.
But that we should be judged on the content of our character. So those books are out there, and I think they're still relevant in that those talking points are still valuable for people to understand why we need to be treated equally and why there needs to be a separation of church and state, and how this country, even if the majority of people might be Christians, we are not a Christian country. We are a democracy, and we are not a theocracy. So those things are still there. Those books are still relevant. So and they're still great reading historically. So I do encourage people to go out and read those books. They're great. And one of the things was that when I first approached a publisher, I was actually writing a book about, I had done 40 interviews with the judges and the lawyers and the plaintiffs that were moving those cases forward, and people that were activists and politicians moving marriage equality forward back in 2002 and 2003. And I approached a publisher, and they said, well, we're not ready to hear those stories of those, lawyers and those people that are putting their lives out there. But we need to know, first of all, why is marriage equality important to gay people? Because we don't even think it's important to gay people, because we want sexual freedom and feminism and marriage is a heterosexual patriarchal institution. And I said, okay, well, I said, people need to know, no, we do need marriage equality, not just domestic partnerships. This is important to us as citizens of the United States to have full and equal opportunity to form families and to have these rights and to protect our loved ones. And so I want to write a book. They're like, okay, well, can you write that book? And I said, yes. And he said, well, when can you do it? And I said, I'm going to do it now. And they're like, can you have it ready? This was in July of 2003 or June of 2003. And they're like, can you have it ready for 2004, April? And I was like, hell yeah. And so I was just like, Spirit, you know, work with me here, because this book is needed. People need to know, not just, you know, people who identify as heterosexual, but the LGBT community needs to know these stories of how we're being hurt, how we're not able to be in the hospitals with our loved ones as they're dying, or even go to the funeral home, or know where our loved ones are being buried, or have any of these rights. It was so egregious, the things that were happening to loving same-sex couples and their children, because we didn't have rights. We just didn't have those rights.
And it's still happening.
It's still happening. Yeah.
You know, we're just about out of time here, and I hate to cut you short. We'll have to have that conversation again on another podcast.
Okay, sure. As you can tell, I'm super passionate about it.
That's what I wanted to end it with, is like, can you see Davina's creative expression of, you know, that's creativity at its finest, when something moves your soul so deeply that over 10 years later, it's still firing you up and still urging you on. And it is a subject that we do need to talk about again. And we are talking about it at the Finding Freedom Symposium this year in January in Palm Springs, LGBTQsymposium.com. So, Dr. Davina, tell people where they can find you, and we will definitely have you back again on the podcast.
Thank you, Renee. I love chatting with you. It's so much fun. So probably the easiest, since my name is DavinaKotulski.com, is probably hard to remember. Go to followyourcourageousheart.com. That's my new passion. Well, I think it's always been my passion. I want to help everybody, not just LGBTQ people, but help everybody follow their hearts and be fully self-expressed and be the authentic person you came here to be. So if you go to followyourcourageousheart.com, you can read more about, you know, how actually there's a class there you can sign up for free and get more information and just stay in touch with me. So
that's great.
Thank you so much, Renee.
And if you want to know more about how the winds inspired me, check out Winds of Spirit. And as both of us as authors, what I'd like to say is buy our books.
Yeah.
You know, buy our books. It's like what that athlete, the soccer player said, hey, it's time to give us the ball. Well, it's time to buy our books, because did you hear her speak? The woman who's the soccer player?
I didn't, but I love
women's rights. It's like, it's time. Well, she said it in front of Bernard graduating class. It's time to give us the effing ball. And, you know, take that ball, buy our books. You know, people spend 5 years, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, lots and lots of rejections. And it's really important to support people that you find entertaining, who inspire you. So I'll leave on that note. What do you say with that closing?
Yeah, that sounds great. Can I just, one last thing? And I love that you're published with Hay House. And I want everybody to remember that Hay House was created by Louise Hay in her 60s, I believe. And it was her self-publishing company. So remember that if you met with rejection, you know, right now it's a tight market. A lot of publishers are afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to go out there and publish your own book, or get out there and speak and promote yourself, because that's important too. So don't give up.
Right. Follow that muse till the end of time.
Nice.
Thank you, Davina.
Thank you, Renee. And I look forward to seeing you in January.
And I'll see everyone next week on the Practical Shaman Podcast.
Bye-bye.